Welcome to the Mount Pleasant Podcast, featuring discussions and interviews about the people, places, and events that make Mount Pleasant such a special place.
This is the Mount Pleasant Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Cleary, and all thanks to the great people of Mount Pleasant Magazine, I get the honor, the privilege of introducing you to Mount Pleasant, the people who make it such a special place to do business, to work, and even to live. We're introducing you to Mount Pleasant's best on the Mount Pleasant Podcast. At the beginning of the new year, we start to think and look forward to all the great things that happen in the Lowcountry. In Mount Pleasant, we focus on the Cooper River Bridge Run, and then, of course, an event like the Blessing of the Fleet that takes place at the end of April. But the start of the year in the Lowcountry, it's all focused on one event, the Southeastern Wildlife Exposition, and that's our focus today on Mount Pleasant Podcast. I'm Brian Cleary, joined by John Powell. John is the CEO and president of SEWE. And John, when people talk and think about the Southeastern Wildlife Exposition, I always hear, oh man, it's such a great art show. And there's so much more about it, which there is, but let's focus on the art, because truly this is an amazing top quality art show.
Well, that's interesting. That's what way you started, because SEWE is different to so many different people. There's some people that have never even made it into the Fine Art Gallery at Charleston Place, but it is the core focus of our show, with artists coming from around the country to set up and be here for 3.5 days. And it's a very unique thing. You know, wildlife art's a niche, and it's very popular with our crowd that blends into the sporting world and conservation and anything outdoors. So it's a really special thing.
And talk about the quality and the level of the artists, because obviously with any, whatever kind of profession, sport, whatever, you have different levels of people involved, but really the quality of the artists that come and show their works at SEWE is really second to none in the entire nation.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. We have different levels of quality. We want to be a platform for extraordinary artists, for up and comers. You know, we want to make sure we have spots for local and regional artists that we want to support. So we have the full spectrum. You know, there is a certain level of quality, a certain price point that we have to maintain. But within that, you know, you have artists from around the country, some that, you know, may have work in the National Museum of Wildlife Art, and others that are just getting started. And I say the age of the internet, when our committee used to jury artists way back when, the artists would send slides, and it would be an all-day affair going through it. And now, you know, you have access to great art that you can find online all the time, and great artists, I should say. So when somebody new comes on our radar, it's really exciting, you know, and typically they're young and they're just getting started. So opportunities for everybody.
And as someone tunes into our podcast and is watching and listening to our conversation, I'm sure they're curious about the photo, the painting that's behind you. What can you tell me about that?
Oh, that's one in the SEWE collection. It's not the feature this year, but it's an elk that was painted by Julie Jepson, who's an extraordinary artist. She was a featured artist many years ago. She's one of the top sellers, and makes the trek from out west to Charleston every year, and has a lot of collectors in the region at SEWE.
And as we talk about the artists that will come to town, obviously you're pulling in from all over the country, but there are some local people, and we'll see some local art as well, correct?
Sure. You know, just a few years ago, Mark Horton, who's a great friend and a great artist, was our featured artist, and we've had locals before. So that's important. And they, you know, they're great at getting other art collectors out here. You know, some of their collectors find work from other artists, and that happens all over the ballroom.
We're talking about the Southeastern Wildlife Exposition coming up in Charleston, the kickoff to the tourist season, really the kickoff of the year across the Lowcountry. I'm Brian Cleary, joined today on Mount Pleasant Podcast, where the pages of Mount Pleasant Magazine come alive, by John Powell, who is the CEO and president of SEWE. So we talk about the art, and as I said up at the beginning, there's so much more to SEWE than the art. John, run us through this year's show, this year's exhibition. Tell us about some of the other highlights that people will be able to experience this year at SEWE.
We're excited about the programming we have. We had joked internally that maybe we did a little too much this year, but when we're provided these great opportunities, we don't want to turn them down. You know, so the Gilliard Center is a perfect example of this, you know, living, breathing site where you have exhibitors, from knife makers to wood turners, and the list goes on and on. You know, brands that folks will be familiar with, and not unlike the artists, some are local and some come from all over the country. But on the performance hall side, each day, and it's not always the same every year, but each day we have sort of the same group. So Forrest Galante, who is an adventurer, you'll see him on Discovery Channel and other programming. He'll be here for the first time. So we're excited about a newcomer on stage. Bush Wildlife Sanctuary with their animals, they're a mainstay. They're extremely popular. They pop up all over Charleston during SEWE week. And then we partnered with Ducks Unlimited to show their film, Wings Over Water. We didn't produce the film, but DU had a hand in doing that. And so they'll screen that and talk about migration with a panel after the show. And then the National Marine Mammal Foundation, which we've just begun a relationship with. They've just gotten on our radar through an artist, coincidentally, and they have a presence right here in Charleston. And we're excited about telling their story to our attendees.
Podcasting has exploded in popularity, especially local podcasts. As of 2022, 62% of Americans have listened to a podcast. 38% have listened in the last month. 26% in the last week. The podcasting audience is booming with no signs of slowing down. Call the podcast hotline to be featured on these podcasts or to receive information about podcast marketing. Call 843-530-0403 or visit carolinapodcasts.com.
You're listening to the Mount Pleasant Podcast.
And at the media luncheon earlier this month, they did a presentation as well. Can you explain to people who are watching and listening why that partnership came about with you and what SEWE does? Because this isn't the first time that you've reached out and helped out an organization that's part of what SEWE does.
Sure. And the short story is people ask how art and conservation mix, and some of it's obvious, but an artist, Kathleen Dunphy, who was with us last year, who resides in California, called and said, hey, I have a friend out here in San Diego, works for the National Marine Mammal Foundation. And we hopped on the phone and the conversation started. And very quickly she said, well, we have a presence. We have an office in Charleston. So I went and met with the team there. And you learn so much. I mean, this is an organization that really got their start by monitoring and evaluating the Navy dolphins, which are just extraordinary mammals, and goes from there to, a not-for-profit, and they research rescue. Their stories of rescue are pretty extraordinary. So look, they're a large conservation organization, but we can provide a platform that maybe they wouldn't normally have access to. 40,000 people. It's intriguing because it's a marine-based conservation organization, something we don't always highlight, and it's new. It's new programming because we have so many attendees that come year after year, and this is something new that they'll be able to enjoy, just like some of the just like Forest and just like the Wings Over Water film. And that's just one exhibit site.
And you mentioned the Gilliard Center, and so much will be going on there. Something new this year, the night before the actual official kickoff to SEWE, going to have a concert that ties into SEWE that'll be happening at the Gilliard Center. Yeah,
we're excited. And this goes back to a great working relationship with the Gilliard Center. They living, breathing, open the doors. So we'll have music from Steep Canyon Rangers, and those tickets are available through the Gilliard Center. And that's a component to SEWE we've wanted to have for years. It's a natural partner to do it with. It's a stage that we're already using, I guess you could say. And I hope that music becomes even more a part of SEWE. We have to evolve and offer new things to attendees that are regulars, or bring new people in, and music's a natural way to do that.
The Southeastern Wildlife Exposition is coming up on February 17th, 18th, 19th, all across downtown Charleston. And John Powell is the CEO and the president of SEWE, joining me today on the Mount Pleasant podcast here. Well, this is where the pages of Mount Pleasant Magazine come alive. And as we talk about SEWE, John, got to talk about some of the, I hate to say big, but maybe more well-known elements of that. And I think for some people that starts with the dock dogs. They'll be back, right?
Sure. And that is big. They've become a really integral part of what we do at Brittle Bank. It's just fun. And that's the best way to say it. And there's some pretty fierce competitors out there, but they'll be in the same location they always are at Brittle Bank, and dogs will be jumping all 3 days of SEWE. And there's so much more there, right? We have ProPlan is a great sponsor of SEWE, and so they'll have Mike Stewart in town. We have Boykin Spaniel Rescue or Boykin Spaniel Society out there. Bill Coburn from Windy Knoll Farms, he'll be there with his border collies running sheep through their paces. We have a kids area, a petting zoo, and we also have a sporting village, which offers, access to guides, outfitters, and wares that you might use in the outdoors. And a lot of our partners, our corporate partners that are activation partners out there, like John Deere through local dealerships and Purina Pro Plan, as we mentioned. So it's a busy place. Brittle Bank's almost become a show unto itself.
And it looks like there's a new dog event out there, the Flying Disc Dog Competition.
Yeah, that'll actually be at Marion Square.
Okay.
We have a full set of programming at Brittle Bank. So that fit into a calendar slot at Marion Square. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that really Brittle Bank and the Marriott across the street have really become one big site. And so we've expanded to the upstairs of the Marriott to allow more room for some of those guides and outfitters and sort of discerning sportsmen. And we have our antique decoys and collectibles downstairs. So the Marriott will be a much busier place than it has been in the past.
Well, let's turn the focus then over to Marion Square, the Birds of Prey. So many huge and fun and interactive things will be going on right there in the center of downtown Charleston as part of SEWE.
Sure. And there's no secret how much we love the Center for Birds of Prey. Great friends, and we try to support them wherever we can. And the work they do is extraordinary. And they're right here in our backyard, just a stone's throw further north from Mount Pleasant. So we try to encourage people to go there by bringing them here. They actually shut down the center so they can be at SEWE for 3 days. And that means a lot to us. And then the Flying Disc Dogs will be there. The National Marine Mammal Foundation will actually show people how they doctor these mammals and dolphins specifically. And then the South Carolina Department of Agriculture, which is one of the busiest tents at all of SEWE, will have their members, and then their stage will be alive almost on the hour, every hour with chefs. So it's a busy place.
So, John, obviously SEWE is a big event for folks from Mount Pleasant, Somerville, wherever, all coming to downtown Charleston, families coming in, people from really, out of state, everybody comes together. Can we switch the focus, though, for a second and talk about SEWE and the economic impact that it has, the positive economic impact that this event has on the Lowcountry economy?
Sure. I'm pretty excited. We're working with the college again this year for an economic survey, which we have not done since 2019. And I think they go as far back as, 2000 or a long way. And several organizations have performed those. But now I think so that we can compare apples to apples, really, most of the major events go through the College of Charleston. They are extremely smart. They know what they're doing. And, we'll give them a list of attendees, and the survey will go out quickly, and we'll find out what kind of impact we have. But I think that number will be high. The price of everything has gone up. As you know, the hotels and retail partners downtown especially, prices have nudged up a little bit. So I think that number, hopefully, if we have some pretty weather, and hopefully for the city of Charleston, we'll show that number is really big.
So you'll be selling tickets for the events. It all goes to SEWE. For folks that aren't aware, and I think everybody is, but just in case, you're a 501(c) nonprofit. So talk about the Southeastern Wildlife Exposition beyond this event. What's the mission of SEWE?
Multifaceted, and you just touched on it. The economic piece of SEWE has become as much of what we do. And I wanted to touch on it a second ago. The economic impact is one thing, but one of the most proud moments that I've had at SEWE is, in the fall of 21, when we were still dealing with Omicron and some of these other variants in a major way, and still learning. We had to make a decision to have SEWE 22. You can't just pop tents up on a weekend. It takes months and months and months to plan. And so we had this board and this staff that said, we're going to put our head down and go for it. We're going to be optimistic. And that really kicked off 22 for the city of Charleston. So it's it's not just economic. It's an uplift for the hospitality industry and for the city, for the city to see it alive again. And so that's a great moment, and we're going to continue to do that. And so I just went off on a tangent and probably didn't answer your question.
That's all right. So let's follow that up, because obviously that's part of your mission. But overall,
sure.
The Southeastern Wildlife Exposition, SEWE is a nonprofit And your mission is what?
It's arts and conservation, education. And, you can see that in all the things we just discussed. When we have the opportunity to send an artist into schools, our featured artist this year, Ryan Kirby, is an incredible guy. And one of the things that people don't know is that every year he goes to the Citadel, to teach, if you want to call it teach or lecture. And because he's a younger, tough outdoorsman, he really connects with, some of the guys over there. And so, you make a connection through art, and then that leads to one of those guys exploring a career in art or conservation, that sort of thing. That's great. And a lot of our organizations that we work with, like the Center for Birds of Prey, they're in schools all the time, unsung heroes. They're in there lecturing, educating young minds. And then a lot of our programming that's conservation based is free and open to the public here down at Marion Square. And even the entertainment that is educational, a ticket is pretty inexpensive and children are free. So that's part of what we do. But the art community from coast to coast and the wildlife art community knows us well. And there used to be many shows, wildlife art shows around the country, and a lot of those have gone by the wayside, but we have continued to be a beacon. A lot of that has to do with the strength of the city of Charleston and its growth and its support of our event, as well as our attendees and our corporate partners' support of what we do.
John Powell's our guest today on Mount Pleasant Podcast. I'm Brian Cleary. John is the CEO and president of the Southeastern Wildlife Exposition, SEWE, coming up February 17th, 18th, and 19th. Now, John, I know as the big man, the guy in charge, you can't have favorites. So tell me a little bit, maybe a secret, a nugget, something that that happens at the event that maybe people don't know enough about, and I should really go and see. Give me one of your faves.
Okay. And I can have favorites. I just can't talk about them all the time.
Okay.
But for those that have joined our benefactor program or patron program, the preview afternoon, which is this year sponsored by Peninsula of Charleston, a care facility that's going to be built downtown. It's your first crack at seeing the art. So the body of work that each artist has brought is complete. Nothing's been sold yet. And it's really magical. At the same time, Sunday is a sneaky day. People don't realize that it's a great day to come and see artwork. Some artists have sold and replaced with a new piece. It's a little less hectic than Saturday, just like Friday. And so, the key is, and locals already know this, right? But those that are coming from out of town, the city sort of blends into SEWE. So you can walk out of Marion Square and go have a lunch and a drink somewhere and then walk to Gilliard. It's very walkable. The major sites that are on this side of the peninsula. And then once you're at Brittlebank and Marriott, you have enough to see all day. And then along with that is don't try to see it all in one day. You can't. If you want to take your time, SEWE is a multi-day event. And if you really want to see it all, take your time and let it come to you.
And that's where the ticket situation with SEWE works out really well, because you have the opportunity to buy passes for the entire weekend. So let's talk about it. How can people get tickets? And how is it that you guys, and this is such a positive thing, but the SEWE ticket price is really low, and you've kept it that way. It's really affordable for families.
It is, and it's discounted between now and February 1st. So if you go online, you can still order tickets online. We'll ship them to you. For those that are local, you can get them at all the local visitor centers, as well as the Gilliard. So, and that's easy, but get them before February 1st while they're still discounted. And then if we're not sold out, which we never actually said before, but they'll be available at all the exhibit sites during SEWE weekend.
And obviously the ticket sales help to raise the money to help run the nonprofit. But if I'm someone who's interested in SEWE, becoming a benefactor of some type, what is it that I can do to assist the Southeastern Wildlife Exposition?
Well, just call us, send us an email, let us know how you want to get involved. Again, we've had incredible support at the corporate level. And for the first time really in our history, we're sort of maxed at being able to take care of our partners. We shrunk our benefactor program just a little bit to increase the experience for those that are here. As everybody knows is familiar with SEWE, it can get busy at any event, at any exhibit site. And so we're taking a hard look at that. But there's nobody that we won't have a conversation with, and whether that's a food vendor, venue, a corporate entity that wants to get involved, people that want to volunteer. So, there's a spot for everybody to help out if they want to.
So, John, I know you have a small staff, so you guys will be busy. How much sleep will you actually get February 17th, 18th, and 19th? Very
little, probably. But it's not just me. You're right. I got a great team here, and they're working around the clock. But, we love what we do. So while we can't totally relax during the event, we love to see what we've been working on all year come to fruition, to see it built. And it's a pretty draining couple of days to watch it all get packed back up again and hit the restart button.
And then you'll go forward and February 20th, start planning, I guess, for the 2024 SEWE.
Absolutely. It's what people ask all the time, do you work all year doing this? And we do. Some of the decisions for 24 have already been made, and they have to be. It's a living, breathing thing year round, and it's gotten bigger. It's gotten more complicated, just like everything has. But again, great team, great support from the community. So the future looks really bright for SEWE.
Well, that's awesome, John, because it's a labor of love for you, but giving back to the community. It's an event that everybody across the Low Country really loves. If they want to find out more information on SEWE, I know you got a great website. Where should they go?
Yep, SEWE.com, and you can find most anything there. And if you can't, call our office. We'll try to help you out.
John Powell, the CEO and president of the Southeastern Wildlife Exposition, coming up February 17th, 18th, and 19th. John, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today.
Brian, thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
This is where the pages of Mount Pleasant Magazine come alive. We appreciate you joining us for the Mount Pleasant Podcast. I'm Brian Cleary. Thank you for listening and watching.
Thanks for spending your time with the Mount Pleasant Podcast, your community, your podcast. Listen to past and future episodes at mountpleasantpodcast.com.